Welcome to the Speak Like a Leader podcast with John Bates. Welcome to the show. With me today is Ken Eslick, and he is the co-founder and CEO of the Leaders Lab, which is an executive leadership recruiting firm, and he's the host of the Leaders Lab podcast, which I have appeared on, and you can go find that. We had a great conversation there, which is a weekly show that delves into the world of leadership and personal development. And he's a Tony Robbins trainer, and he's the president and founder of the Leaders Lab, and he likes to share, like I do, actionable advice and lessons from great leaders across all walks of life. And he's an expert in leadership and team building. He's got extensive experience leading teams as large as 1,000 in both public and private companies. And as a C-suite coach and talent acquisition specialist, Ken has had a successful Fortune 500 exit and has placed over 500 executives. So he's certainly a guy to talk to if you're interested in finding executives or being placed. And he's just a great guy. We had a great conversation on the Leaders Lab podcast, and I wanted to get him over here on speaklikealeader.show. So welcome to the show, Ken.
Yeah, John, thanks so much. Great to be here.
And you can find Ken at linkedin.com/in/Ken Eslick, KENESLICK. And you can also go to his website, theleaderslab.co. No apostrophe in that.
That's it. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, welcome, Ken. So, listen, you've got a pretty impressive background and a pretty impressive resume. And I think one of the things that human beings kind of naturally do is assume that everything must have just been awesome for you all the time, forever. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty sure that's not true. So I want to just jump right in and ask you, what was one of those low moments in your life and what did you learn from it?
Yeah, like the counter resume, right? I could have another resume that has all of those things on it, like the time I got drunk and lost my corporate job, the time I gambled too heavily in the stock market and lost almost all of my net worth back when I was like 30 years old. So wow. Let's go with let's go with the stock market collapse of the early 2000s and kind of my involvement in that. So I was a young guy, John, and we didn't grow up with a lot of money in our house, so I was very focused on, I'm going to crush it financially, right? And really almost too much focus on it, right? Like really out of focus, where it was my whole identity, my mission, and things went well. We built a business, we were doing well, and then the business got bought out. And I was sort of like Mike Tyson in the early days of his fighting career, right? Until he got his ear bit off, or no, he bit someone else's ear off.
Yeah, right.
Until he got knocked out by Buster Douglas, everything was roses, right? But as soon as he had like that one big loss, he didn't know how to handle it. And that, I would say, sort of happened to me. I was sort of, things were going well. Business was going well. We had started a family. It kind of seemed like, I remember I had an uncle that said, like, everything you touch turns to gold, and it was like, I think I started to believe that hype, right? And then I'm into the stock market at a time that everything was going bananas. You couldn't put money in and not make money.
What year was that about?
Early 2001-ish, right in there.
So like right after the .com crash, where
right before it, I guess.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe 2000, something like that, right? So
yeah,
and I'm in every brand name that ended up, eating shit eventually. You know what I mean? So like Priceline and all these companies.
Yeah.
And I got slapped with reality in like a hurry. And my net worth, or our net worth, ended up going from like a couple $1 million to like, can we keep our house? Like, do we need to sell it?
Yeah.
We kind of did need to sell it. We didn't go bankrupt, but we had to sell the house, and we decided to move anyway. But I remember what that did to me, John, like the identity, because so much of my self-worth was tied to my net worth, and it shouldn't have been, but it was. And it just took me like years to recover from that.
Yeah.
And I started playing very small and very safe after that. It was sort of like the stove was too hot. And now, I'm like a little kid, little toddler that doesn't want to go near it. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I stopped taking risks. I stopped making investments. I got a lot more conservative.
Yeah.
Still ended up with a pretty good career, until the other one that I mentioned, which is where I really did, have one too many drinking episodes at work that led to an early demise. So yeah, it's not all perfect, obviously, and I think the path of growth, we never really publicize the speed bumps, right? It's always like, well, I got to point A, I got to point B, and I got to point C. But along the way, a lot of times it's really bumpy,
I fell in this gigantic freaking hole and I got mud all over myself. And
I mean, and I do agree. I'm glad you asked those questions. I prefer to talk about them because that's where the good stuff is. It's like sort of what did we learn when we got smacked around? What did we learn when our identity got yanked from us? So I had to learn some of the same lessons more than once too. I've got a mentor that tells me the universe is super interesting that way, is it'll just keep throwing the same situations at you until you figure out how to deal with it,
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. If you don't, till you get it, you got to keep repeating it. Right.
That's it.
Well, so now I've got this term that I'm very proud of because it took me more than a decade to actually figure out how to say it this succinctly. So I put a little TM on it. I bought the website, I think I'm going to write a book.
Cool.
But the term is insightful vulnerability, right? So I would love to go deeper into the insights from those things. I mean, let's talk about the stock market one first. Mm-hmm. You put money into the market, you got burned like all of us. That was when I had my .com company, on October 25th, like 2 days before my birthday in 2000, our investors walked in with a couple of bodyguards, and threw everybody out, right? Wow. They told us before, they said, listen, guys, we don't think you're going to be profitable enough. We'd raised over $80 million. And they said, we don't think you're going to be profitable fast enough. So we're going to pull the plug. And, I think it's not like they were worried we were going to hurt anybody, but they came out, like they have to do it because they just have to have some muscle there. And it was just a really awful experience,
What a scene that must have been.
Oh my gosh, it was freaking so awful. And like all our emails stopped working, and there wasn't Google and Yahoo emails and all that kind of stuff yet. So we all lost touch with each other. I didn't get to apologize to the 600 people that they just locked out of the buildings.
Oh, wow.
We had a distribution center. It was an awful, awful experience, and it hit a bunch of us. So, you weren't the only one. And you said you got more conservative with your investing, but then you might've gotten some perspective on it. Tell me looking back from now, what do you think you learned from that experience? Like maybe don't believe your own press is one, right?
Sure.
Like you started to believe everything you touched turned to gold, and
I mean, I think the most important lesson, is pay attention to where you're getting your significance from. We all have the need for significance. It's a human need. It's built into all of us, right?
Yes,
so, and hopefully it's not our number one thing that we're always leaning into, right? Because you see that from some people, like, look at me, and you see it in different ways, whether it's social media, whether it's, I got to drive a Ferrari and throw a $100,000 Rolex out the window to be seen. Right. Or whether it's pounding your chest in a leadership position when really all you needed to do was show compassion and care, right? There's different ways to use that. Then there's also really good ways, I think, to get significance too, and to not necessarily chase it, but like by contributing or helping others or being of service.
Yeah.
So I'd say the biggest thing I learned was, and it took a while. It wasn't like that day, like, oh, here's the lesson. Right after the smack in the face, here comes the lesson in a nice bow. I mean, I think it took years, but it was if I put everything that I value about myself or my self-worth and I equate it to either how I'm compensated or what my net worth is, and that's it. That's the only thing. First of all, it's pretty shallow, and secondly, it's fleeting, right? It can just go away. It's not really based on any kind of foundational thing of who I am, and it's also really selfish. It doesn't really involve anybody else. It doesn't involve me helping anybody else. But I just became so, passionate when I was a kid about like, I'm going to do this. Yeah. So I don't think it's bad, like to get leverage on yourself that way. Right. And I think a lot of 20-something-year-olds have that where,
it's the time to do it.
Time of life. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. But to stay there over time is not going to be fulfilling. And you could then you can use the same logic for anything. I mean, the stay-at-home parent who attaches themselves to their kids, which is nice, but if that becomes their whole identity and then the kids leave, they're left with just feeling empty, this massive hole. And so so I'd say that was the biggest thing was that and it like I said, it took a while. Now I'm super conscious of it, of where does my value come from? Yeah. When I need significance, how am I getting it? Is it in a way that is serving those around me,
Yeah. It's interesting to me to hear you say that because I think I had a very similar experience. I realized that, I would say it differently, but I realized that I had it like opportunity only knocks once.
Yeah.
Right. And boy, you better make it, and this better work. And it was all about me succeeding. Right. And I wanted to take other people with me. I was a nice enough guy, I suppose, but I was coming from a very selfish, very limited place.
Right.
And looking back now, man, what I would tell an early stage entrepreneur is you're going to fail. You're going to fail a bunch of times and maybe you'll succeed the first time and God bless you if you do, but it might not even be the best thing. Right. And we passed up our chance to potentially sell our company to Amazon back in the day because we wanted to go public by, ourselves. Right. And I thought this was my one shot in freaking my entire life. And I just didn't get the long view of being an entrepreneur and going through those cycles, and this one works and that one doesn't, and this one doesn't, and then that one might. And, to just get that there was just so much more to life than that one single thing. And if I'd gotten that, I would have had a little bit less of a grip on things, and we might have sold to Amazon and then I would be, somewhere with a whole bunch of Amazon stock today,
Right. No, it is funny. I think I had a similar mindset in that, so that being careful kind of after the fact was, I blew my chance. As if there's one.
As if there's only one. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I made the goal of becoming a multimillionaire in my early 30s, but now I effed it up and it's gone. Yeah. And, what's interesting is a lot of that has to do with our wiring. I can't obviously speak for you, but we had a lot of sayings in our house, like, money doesn't grow on trees.
Yeah. No,
we're really not really unhelpful college people. Yeah. We're not really college people. You're not really college material. So when I broke through and started making good money and stuff like that, everyone around me in my environment, not so much friends or like my wife, but like my family, my growing up family was, oh my God, like you make how much money? You're like, hang on to that, dude. Like that's almost as if you got lucky or had won the lottery.
Right.
But it wasn't really something that was going to sustain. And so you do what you can to go, that's BS. Thanks for your opinions. Don't really need them. I'm marching or carving my own path.
Yeah.
But when the stuff hits the fan, all the limiting beliefs, all the self-doubt, all the old wiring kind of kicks back in and goes, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Everybody told you were in over your head and you just proved it. Right. And so now let's play it safe for a while. So I stayed in corporate America, and I had a really good career with a really great company. But I would, I all of a sudden became the guy that's like, let's put money into bonds and let's do this. And I slowly started building some money back in a very conservative way, didn't jump right back out onto the entrepreneurial bandwagon. Developed a drinking, I shouldn't say developed one then, extended a drinking habit that had started when I was like, 13, 14 years old and just got like worse over time,
Side note.
Yeah.
Think about beer commercials.
Yeah.
And think about beer advertisements. Yeah. Did you know that that industry disproportionately advertises in places where people under 18 are going to be found?
Oh,
because
wow.
If they can get you drinking before you're 18, you're vastly more likely to develop a really serious habit.
Right.
And like I worked with an organization, I helped train one of the people there, and they were trying to really stop that. And this was a while ago, but that's not a mistake. It's not like they really do target kids, because if you can get somebody to start drinking at 13,
sure,
your brain's still developing, your social skills are still developing, and that gets just plong.
Yeah. Well, and if you think about people that drink or use drugs or eat a bunch of food or, obsessively look at porn or like whatever they're doing that maybe is a habit that they shouldn't be doing, it usually solves a need for a short period of time. So with drinking, we had some family issues and stuff like that. And this was a way for me to get love and connection outside of my home and a tribe of friends and elevated probably my social status and stuff like that. Right.
Yeah.
So I'm like, why not? And again, my North Star, even back then, was I just need to make money. So I had jobs back then. So to me, as long as I was staying true to my North Star, right? Making money, kicking butt, doing this and that.
Yeah.
Nobody could really tell me what to do. And this only perpetuated itself in the military when I was in there. And then in my corporate career, it was sort of like, what are you talking about? I'm making my numbers and I can go out and run a 10K on 2 hours of sleep after drinking 10 beers. So you can't talk to me.
So what's the problem? Yeah.
Yeah. As long as I can plow through it. But, eventually with a lifestyle like that, the rubber's going to hit the road in more ways than one. So, I mean, I think, you're going to have relationship stress. You're going to have job stress, whatever it was. And I did really well in the corporate world, made great numbers normally, and thankfully got to have great teams and mentor a lot of people. But I also occasionally would mess up because, I'd overindulge or do whatever. Yeah. And I was sort of known as a guy that liked to party a lot. Yeah. I've been talked to about it more than once. And then finally just one time too many, got in kind of a spat with a guy. It didn't get physical, but it was, it was ugly and it was public and it was alcohol involved. And at my level in the company, you don't get a do-over on something like that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's sort of like you get like, would you like to just raise your hand or would you like to go through an HR investigation? And what the end result of that's going to be. And well-deserved. I would have done the same thing, So that was another moment of picking myself up because, again, identity had been built back. It was still largely based on income, power, span of control, titles.
Right.
Significance, right?
Yeah.
And so I had to kind of rebuild from there as well. And that's how I got involved in all the Tony Robbins stuff. And, because at a certain point, it's like I've got the wrong playbook. You know what I mean? Like I'm chasing the wrong things. I'm having some success, but I'm not really having fulfillment in these pursuits,
Yeah. It's really interesting. I think we've got parallel tracks in some ways.
Sure.
Up until I was 40, I was, which was just after I lost Big Words. I was in my 30s then. And I was really just circling the drain, and my girlfriend at the time said, John, you're super smart and you're super capable. And I watch you sit here and just not accomplish anything. And I really think you would like to do this thing called the Landmark Forum. So that was kind of my Tony Robbins moment. Yeah. I went and did the Landmark Forum and I realized that I'd been living my life like the world was going to hell in a handbasket and I should just get everything I can right now, you know? So like I never had long-term relationships and I had lots of credit card debt because the more
who cares?
The more, right. When it all goes up in flames, the more credit card debt I have, the better I did. Right.
Sure.
And like, cause I don't have to, you know, we're all done anyway.
Yeah. You leverage the system, you know? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And luckily for me, that was at the time when there were a lot of those, you know, very, very low interest deals. And I just kept pushing it to those things. Right. But in the Landmark Forum, I realized that like I was living like the world was going to hell in a handbasket. I mean, pure rock star, right? Like, let's have fun tonight. That's it, you know? And that's not who I wanted to be.
Right.
And it took me at least a year or more to change a lot of my habits. And then I really worked at it for a decade from when I did it, and felt like I was just making no progress, but I just kept at it, right? Kept working on being who I wanted to be instead of who my default had been. And at about 10 years, I feel like I just popped through something and whoa, my life was amazing. And so, you know, it's interesting. I feel like we've been on somewhat parallel tracks there.
Yeah, it's funny. What you're saying definitely resonated with me. This idea, it's funny. It's like you fear the future, but at the same time, you don't see much of a future. You know what I mean? So it's kind of a weird combo. Right. And I finally, it's kind of funny. I ended up stopping drinking, and that was about 6 years ago, a little over 6 years ago.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
That's awesome.
What was funny about it kind of is I had a guy once in recovery go, hey man, tell me about some of the craziest stuff you did, you know, everybody's got their stories, right? And there's a lot of fun and funny stories, whatever, right? It's not all bad. But you tell these like outrageous stories. And then he goes, I don't think you told me the best one or the craziest one. I said, what's that? And he's like, that you still kept drinking after each and every one of those things. So even after the corporate walkout,
right,
it was like, in my head, it was more like, well, they're overreacting. It's just corporate. It's so uptight, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? And it's like, looking back on it, it's like, I didn't leave anyone an option, you know, in that scenario, right? They had to do what they had to do. Yeah. And, so for me, that was a big change along with all this personal development type stuff. And changing the wiring. I mean, I think around money, especially for entrepreneurs and business leaders out there, whether it's money or a title or you're climbing the ladder or whatever you're doing, you're building a bigger business, which is all awesome. But I think if the North Star is more about providing service, providing value, you know, to, you know, either as a leader, as a business owner, to your clients, to your customers, to your team, and let the financial part be kind of a byproduct of that. Those are the people that I see really achieve long-term. Yeah. And you're reminding me of that when you talked about it took, you know, it was like a decade later almost, you know, where it's like, you're not looking for these. I think that's the problem of when both you and I were in our more desperate states where we don't want to do anything because we're like, we can't see 10 years ahead. Yeah. So all we care about is like, well, why would I do it right now if it can't give me a benefit right now? Why would I make sales calls, right? Why would I start an email campaign for my business when only 3% of the people are going to respond? I mean, you know, now to me right now, I'm going, well, if you send out 2,000 emails and 3% of the people respond, that's 60 people. That's pretty good. That's a lot of people to talk to. But the old me would have been like, well, 97% of the time it doesn't work. Like, why bother? Right? Yeah. So it's just been this whole change, I think, of mindset of like a longer term vision and leaning into service, you know? Yeah.
You know, my dad did teach me he taught me a lot of great things, but you're reminded me of one of the best things he ever taught me. I just lost him he just died in December of last year. And I'm still stinging from that, you know, that's a hard loss. So I'm happy to remember him and bring him up here. But he told me when I was in high school, he said, I don't remember what prompted it or what was going on or whatever, but he said, son, be kind to the people that you see on the way up.
Sure.
Because they're the same people you're going to see on the way down, and then you're going to see them on the way back up again, and then you're going to see them on the way back down and back up, and you will never regret. You will always be happy that you are kind to people. And
love that.
And isn't that beautiful? And he just got me in a moment. I know I didn't listen to everything he said, I'd be a better man if I did, but that really got me, and I really listened to that, and I really tried to do that. And, now here I am, I just turned 60, and I'm really glad he told me that, because it's so true,
Yeah. I think that this idea, I mean, and what he's also implying in there is like, don't get lost in your own significance, right? Like, it's fleeting, because the implication that you're going to go up and down is like, it's not a one-way track all the time.
Right.
And you're going to need support. Yeah. There's so many people that I have in my life now that, I recruited them when they were in college and stuff like that, and now they're in their 40s and they have families and they're VPs and they're clients of mine and, things like that. And it just becomes like kind of your branding. I mean, I think, it's sort of that old thing of, you ever want to get to know what someone's really like, especially someone in a leader or position of power, is watch how they treat like service staff, like waiters, waitresses, valets. If they're shitty to them, it's just an indicator of who they are,
Bingo. Yeah. That's very, very true. And boy, now you got me thinking about my dad. I loved going around with my mom and dad in Salt Lake City, where he, was for basically his whole life, and where we live now. 'Cause it was like, he's the unofficial mayor, like everywhere that we go, people were so stoked to see them, because he always had a funny joke for them, and he would treat everybody like they were just something so special. So, the pharmacist, when I go in there, still is like, I miss your dad. And the people at the restaurants are just like, he was one of the greatest people I ever met, and it was those people that, he wasn't doing it to try to get something from them.
Sure. Well, and what's interesting is, so I've never met your dad. Don't know what he did for a living. Don't know if he made money, didn't make money, or whatever. And I really don't want you to tell me yet, anyway, because the impression that I have, just based on what you're saying and how people respond to him and treat him, is I'm like, that's a life well lived. Like, that's a guy that was wealthy, regardless of whether he had $5 or $5 billion in the bank, right?
Yeah.
It was like there was probably a lot of people, giving their condolences and appreciation and all of that when he passed, right? And I mean, I think that says a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, and you're right, and it was a life well lived. And he was an attorney, and just interesting side note, again, talking about these up and down and up and down. He worked at a company and kept beating this other bigger company in court. And so they finally came and just made him an offer that he could not refuse. And so he ran the legal department for that company for a long time. And at a certain point, they wanted him to approve something unethical. So I won't name companies, right? Mm-hmm. But they, and he would not do it. And so they got bought by another bigger company, and they just stabbed him in the back, and he left and opened up, his own shop, and was just a one-man shop for the rest of his life. And he did actually very, very well. I'm surprised, because I grew up, I'm the oldest. So when I was there was this fear about money, and just, money doesn't grow on trees, and we don't have enough. And we, so like I got a lot of that frenetic fear around money, but he actually did extremely well,
Yeah. It's interesting, 'cause, my my dad lives near Salt Lake too. My dad lives in Utah in one of the suburbs. And my sister was riding with him on a car trip from Utah. This is earlier this year, from Utah to California or something. So a fairly long drive. And they get a clip of my podcast, and I was talking to somebody else, or maybe a podcast I was on or something, but something came on and they heard it in her car, and it was just the soundbite, the clip. And it just said like, yeah, I had scarcity around money. Well, my dad to my sister, he goes, we never wanted for anything. Like there was always a roof over your head and all of this. And it was like, that's not really the point. Nor is it necessarily, nor is my scarcity issue necessarily your fault. It just is what it is. Right. But it's a real thing. If it's in your wiring, right. Until you get rid of it. And so, I always felt like that was an issue. And hey, sometimes it can be as simple as, like you're saying, like your parents put you on a tight budget, which might make you because there's a lot of good that comes from that too, right? Which is being financially responsible, making your own money, being independent at a young age. But there's also this thing of like, oh my God, we're going to run out, right? Yeah. Like I got to get my ass, moving so that we don't run out.
Well, candidly, I think my mom had undiagnosed PTSD really badly from World War II. She was in World War II Germany. And when she was a little kid, they lived in this beautiful apartment on the top of the train station with glass ceilings, and that got blown up, was one of the first things that got blown up in Munich when the war went on, and they had to go live with their relatives in the countryside in it just was not as nice.
Right.
And she had a lot of privation there. They were very, very lucky that they had relatives who would take them in the countryside, but it was still a lot of privation. And I think that energy was what really permeated the whole thing,
Sure.
But it also did teach me some stuff,
when you think about it, like what are the values or the global beliefs that your mom gets from something like that, right?
Yeah.
Life is short.
Yeah.
You never know what's going to happen. It's a scary world out there. Exactly. And like some of that has to come down to the kids. All of the stuff that we have is going to somehow get down to our kids a little bit, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I do like the thought that, I listened to your story and I think that for whatever you did right and wrong, you are upping the consciousness level around that stuff for yourself and your family. And I think that goes a long, long, long way. I think that's a really big deal because all of this stuff got passed down to our parents from their parents and them from their parents and them from all the way back to Big Bang,
Sure.
So I think it's really great. The stuff that you learned from that and, like life's a journey and it's a growth journey if you're doing it right, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think thank you for that. And I think if we're in growth mode, then there's a couple of things that I think Tony Robbins and some of these other people that I studied really helped me realize, which is our beliefs are just our beliefs, man. They're not necessarily factual. In fact, many times they're not, right?
Yeah.
Just because your mom said the world is a scary place, which it can be at times, does that mean it's always a scary place? Does it mean, or money doesn't grow on trees? Does that mean there's like a finite supply of money and we only get so much and it's sort of rationed to us? Well, no. I mean, Elon Musk never subscribed to that, I guess, or something. So, but the cool thing about it, the messed up thing and the cool thing about it is it's just based on things that happen to us that become almost like grooves in a record that we keep playing over and over again. Literally, like I saw an example of a little girl who was like 3 years old, went in front of a cat, sneezed in front of the cat, like when she went down to pet the cat. A few feet away, her aunt was there, her favorite aunt. Loved this aunt. Like, used to like to dress like her, wanted to be like her. And the aunt goes, "Oh my gosh, you're allergic to cats just like I am." Now the kid now makes the association. I want to be just like her. You know, this is a good thing. Yeah. We can bond. We can connect over this. And now her body literally creates an allergy. Like we saw this whole thing like play out, or in the story it plays out.
Yeah.
And it's not real. Now it feels real because her body can actually get her eyes to water up and get her to sneeze and everything else. But it's not real. And so if it can do that with something that actually requires a physical reaction, then think about the things we tell ourselves about our physical body, what our limitations are, how much we can earn, how much we can't earn, what we're worth, what we can do. You can't do this, you can do this. Like all of that is pre-wired, which can be kind of messed up because it's all based on BS.
Yeah.
But also is really, really cool when you realize that it's based in BS, that you can unwire it. And it's not as simple, or I shouldn't say unwire it, maybe rewire it into something more positive. But unfortunately, it's not a snap your fingers thing. Like I knew my money mindset was jacked for years, but just couldn't quite get it right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it took a while.
So so that's an interesting question for me. Like, what was one of the things that I know it's not an aha and it all changed overnight when you figured this one thing out, but what is one of those things that you maybe did over time, or one of the things that you found or practice that you had that helped you switch that mindset?
Like the scarcity mindset, especially.
Yeah.
So there's a few things combined for me. It's almost like a recipe, right? It's almost like if I said, John, when do you feel your best? And you probably say, well, if I journal and work out and, spend X amount of time. So there's a lot of foundational things like that to me that are important. And then beyond that, it was really like incantations and, almost like meditative type, envisioning what you want, putting it out there. I mean, I know it all sounds like kind of foofy and out here in the clouds, but it's very much like,
no.
If the thoughts that we've had up until whatever point we decide to make a change are repeating over and over again, and they've been doing it in some cases, like in my case, for decades, then you have to replace them with a new thought, new vision that also has to repeat itself to burn out the old wiring. Because guess what? If it's just sort of like, well, I know that's BS intellectually, I guess I won't think that way anymore.
Yeah.
You might be able to change your mind for 5 minutes, but as soon as you become under duress, all those old things will just come back in, right?
Yeah.
So to me, I guess it was a combination of things. Ultimately, there was a lady called, because I tried a lot of different things, especially when it came to money, because what I noticed was, I don't know if have you ever gambled like in a casino?
I mean, I have. It's not one of my favorite things, but I've done it. And
I'm glad it's not. Yeah. I don't like the energy around it, but I used to do it anyway. And what I don't like about it is the feeling when you're winning money is kind of gross in a way, because it's just like, I just want more, right? It's just like, let's just win more. And when you lose, it just feels terrible because you just feel like you just wasted
it. Yeah.
And I'd have a minor version of the same thing around day-to-day finances. Like we blew the deal. Oh, I'm just so so gutted by it, or it would just affect my. And so I really got into this. There's a lady named Marissa Peer who is she's one of the most famous hypnotists in the world, and she just has these like online. She has them for weight loss. She has them for scarcity. She has them for whatever. Yeah. And on top of the other work I had done, I started just looping that in, literally like while I'm lifting weights or whatever. And I'm like, I don't even know why, because I'm not going under hypnosis or anything, but the incantation, the repetitiveness of it seems to work. Yeah.
Yeah. I love the word incantation. It just really hit me recently that we have essentially been physiologically human for about 450,000 years.
Sure.
And we invented the printing press when, and Google when,
Right.
and our thoughts of what's really long ago is like 5, 10, 15,000 years ago. Like 15,000 to 450,000. Like what was going on in that whole entire time, you know, because we were physiologically capable of all the stuff that we do now. And I'm sure that we were doing much more than we currently realize, you know, and incantations were probably a really big part of that, you know, and that realization of some sort of spiritual aspect and some sort of repetitive aspect. And, you know, you and I are both fans of the power of just the word and speaking and, you know, so I love that word incantation for stuff like hypnosis and meditations and guided meditations and things.
Totally. I mean, think about the person with like you know, an eating problem that's overweight and the things that they might say to themselves, you know, you're a loser, you're fat, you're lazy, and it's just a loop and they've been doing it for years potentially. Right.
Yeah.
What if all of a sudden they had a different vision, maybe had a coach, maybe had a North Star of where they were going to go and started marching that path. And then every day in incantations, they said something like, every day in every way, I'm getting healthier and stronger. Every day in every way, I'm getting healthier. And instead of, you're a fat slob or whatever they're saying. Right. And it's just like, it is really, really powerful after a while. And I think what hypnosis does is probably a more advanced way. I don't know a lot about hypnosis, but it's probably a more advanced way of a third party kind of coming in and helping with some of those impressions. So to me, whatever I can do to fine tune, but for anything in life, it's like, if I'm staying true to diet, working out, work-life balance, all of those things, then, you know, it's almost like, you know, the car on a Indy 500 track is going to go better if it's foundationally got all the right stuff, and you got to make the pit stops to do that, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a really good point. And I think that's something that Americans never have been really good at that. And then when the pandemic happened, I think everybody got even worse at that because it all went virtual. And so you could just do meetings back to back for, you know, 10 hours a day. And I think people really overdid it. And I love, you know, one of the other things that I noticed is it dawned on me maybe 10 years ago that the difference between a decent coach and a really good coach is a decent coach will tell you some of the things to stop doing, you know, oh, well, stop doing that, you know, but a really good coach will say, do this instead. Right. Which is what you're doing. You're saying, stop with the negative talk and do this instead. Right. Find that incantation that works for you. Find that, you know, self-hypnosis tape or that meditation, maybe that guided meditation or that mantra that you repeat to yourself over and over when you're working out. And I think it's really, really important because you can't just stop those thoughts. No. You've got to replace those thoughts, right?
It's no different. Earlier too, when we were talking about like, hey, at the beginning of me drinking alcohol, it served a purpose, right? I get friends, I get connection, I get, you know, significance, whatever. Well, if you're going to take that away, then I better find a new way to get connection, to get community, or I'm either going to start drinking again, or I'm just going to be a dry drunk that's just pissed off because now it actually did serve a bit of a purpose that I now need to go in and find a way to solve. And that's why so many people with addictions go back to their addiction because they never found a healthy replacement to take it over.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I read a great book called Power versus Force. And one of the things that he argues in there is that it's not actually low consciousness. Like people turn to drugs and alcohol because they can help them reach a higher level of consciousness, of just the you know, like happiness and joy, but it's fleeting and it's momentary and it's not sustainable. And so, you know, then you just crash down even lower. So I think it really does help to not make that so wrong.
Yeah.
but to look for, okay, well, how else could you find this transcendent experience that would be healthy, right?
That's such a good point. I don't hear many people talk about that, but I was definitely that kind of a drinker where I was looking to connect more. I was looking for, in fact, some of the most profound moments of gratitude and stuff like that I had while I was drinking. But that's a problem in a way because then you need that to feel that, right? Yeah. So it's like, so I literally, when I stopped drinking, it was like, how do I be happy without alcohol? That was literally a question in my mind. Like, how do I, because everything I'd ever done that was of any kind of significance or having fun or celebration or anything involved alcohol. So how do you swap that out? And it was yoga, meditation, healthy community, right? And things that were sustainable more long-term, you know?
Yeah. You know, it's funny because you've been so open. I'm going to follow your lead.
Sure.
I'm a little embarrassed about how much alcohol I have in the house, which I think is the good sign is that I'm not an alcoholic or it would be gone.
Sure.
But I think that why I have that is because I have this very young notion. I grew up Mormon, so you couldn't drink, right? Yeah. And then when I was like 18 or 19, I tried beer for the first time and I liked it, you know, and then I left Mormonism, and for a long time I was non-Mormon. Right. Which is just the other side of the same coin, you know? And then much later, I realized I could just let go of the whole coin and I could just be me and I could be spiritual and I could be happy about my Mormon upbringing and proud of my Mormon heritage and all that. But I think that some of those early experiences, I think that part of the reason I have all that alcohol is because I keep anticipating that I'm going to have a whole bunch of friends over and we're going to try some really nice whiskey and we'll have a great conversation and you know what I mean? And like, and, you know, I have a whole bunch of alcohol and that it doesn't happen that way very often, you know?
Hey, but if it can just sit there and break it out every now and then that's great. You know,
that's okay.
My mindset's not like that with alcohol or ice cream. You know what I mean? Like if I ice cream, I'll eat it. So I just don't keep it, you know, it's the way it is.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah. But that, you know, I'm sure that is at the most root level, me crying out for more friendship and connection.
I think it could be that. I think it's also probably a streak of, I get to do this, right? Because you were restricted.
True.
So
that's probably
there's
true.
a part of like, you can't tell me no.
Yeah.
You know, I'm John.
Right.
I can have
this full bar right here. Yeah. That's funny.
Yeah.
Well, so listen, is there anything I didn't ask you? I know we're right up against the top of the hour and I don't know how pressed you are, but is there something I should have asked you or is there anything that you...
No, I'm fine on time. And like, sometimes my conversations get into this recovery stuff and sometimes not. And I guess what I'll say, because my show's not a recovery show, your show's not a recovery show.
Right.
I'm not trying to make it one. And certainly not about like alcohol necessarily. What I will say is as human beings, you know, we're really talking about self-improvement and wiring and limiting beliefs and stuff like that. Yeah. And there's a mentor of mine named Tommy Rosen that he has this phrase where he said, you know, the definition of, I don't know if he called it addiction, but is when there's something in your life that no longer serves you, a behavior or belief in your life that no longer serves you, but you continue to do it over and over again despite negative consequences. Yeah. If I talk to any human being on the planet that's, you know, maybe not Mother Teresa, they've got something like that, right? Yeah. It can be the more obvious stuff like drug usage or alcoholism or obesity. But it can also just be obsessive thinking. It can be, you know, anxiety comes from a lot of this stuff, you know, and you know, maybe it's just fear. Maybe it's an endless loop that they run in their head about not being enough or whatever, right? These are all on the same wavelength or vibration of addiction, right? And so I think this subject and self-improvement are directly tied together, right? I think there's a little bit of a taboo thing because people go, well, I don't want to identify that way. And I'm like, you don't really need to. We're all we're all human beings, so we are all subject to wiring and these global beliefs that have been built into us over the course of our lives. And I think the more we can do to unravel that stuff, no matter how minor or major it is, then the more growth we're going to experience as leaders, you know?
Yeah, I think that's really, really, really right. You know, we all have, I mean, I think there might be something to resist in this, but I think there's a truth in this is we're all addicted to something.
Up to something.
Right.
Yep.
That behavior that's not serving us that we still do. Right. And the first step is admitting it. Right.
Right. This is not good. I shouldn't do it anymore. Right.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So then what do you replace it with?
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool.
So that's cool. And listen, I think there's a lot to learn from the recovery community. You know, I think there are very, very powerful, just human lessons.
Yes.
You know,
that book, if anyone wants to check it out, is called Recovery 2.0. It's by a guy named Tommy Rosen. It's got tons of 5-star reviews on Amazon. What I think most people would resonate about it is when people hear like AA, and including myself, it's very like, you will turn your will over to God and blah, 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 you know, and it's like very tombstone and lightning. And he purposely created kind of a playbook. It's why it's called Recovery 2.0. It's like, hey, if 1.0 didn't feel that great, you might want to try this. Yeah. And he sort of took the 12 steps of these recovery programs and turned them into kind of a user's guide without all the heavy, overly religious overtones, while still having a spiritual connection, universal connection. Yeah. So it makes it much more approachable for most people, and certainly a lot more tolerable if you're not a hardcore substance addict, but you just want to read about like, hey, how does my brain wired? I want to know more about, you know, what negative beliefs that I keep, you know, playing over and over. How can I get out of those patterns? That book is for anybody that's interested in that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's awesome, because it doesn't have to be recovery from alcohol or drugs. It could be recovery from anxiety, depression. It could be recovery from
crazy these days. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's cool. So Recovery 2.0 by Tommy Rosen.
Yep.
All right, cool.
Awesome.
Well, so tell me one more question that I should ask you about.
Ask me how long I've been married.
How long have you been married?
Coming up on 37 years already. So,
wow.
Yeah. 3 grandkids.
Wow. Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. So all those bumps in the road, we definitely not only made it through, but like thrived through them. And I think that's what helps to, with rewiring, is when you have family, friends, whatever it might be, significant other, that you really do care about, then you can look at your behavior right now, whatever it is, and go, is this consistent with where I want to be in a few years? And what happens if I don't change? Right.
Yeah.
We've got this beautiful family now. We're all in New York. I'm just outside the city. Our kids are hour and a half away from us. So yeah, it's all good.
That's fabulous.
Yeah.
So, wow. Okay. Well, then now I got to ask you a couple other questions.
Sure. No problem.
So what are a couple of things, a couple of pieces of advice, like, you know, how did you do that? Like, that's really awesome. Like, what's maybe a lesson or two? Like, you just gave us one great one, right? Look at those people you love and think, is this behavior consistent with loving them and wanting to be with them, you know, and going forward with them and all that? Is this helping or not?
Sure.
You know? What's something else that you learned out of that long a marriage? I've been married for, I think we're going on 13 years now. Mm-hmm. And I just went through, it's a story for another time, but I just went through 9 months of just the worst time of my life by, you know, times 10,000.
Sure.
Anything before looks like cake.
Right.
And I don't know how I would have done that without Sharon and Johnny.
Sure.
So, you know, so what's another good piece of advice for people in long-term relationships, given your, you know,
I think
your success?
I think there's one some of this is Tony Robbins stuff. Some of it is, whatever, my own thoughts around it. But I remember hearing him say something like, there is a really big part that's natural selection, meaning, did you get it right out of the gate? I mean, I don't think you can fix there's sometimes just bad couples, right? There are couples that you're like, that probably shouldn't have happened. And that's probably, it's probably a lot.
I've known, I've known some. Yeah.
I mean, so even if they go to work on it, even if they, whatever, it was just a bad match to begin with. Right. Yeah. So
when all your friends go like, what are you doing?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's consistent. It's not just the one outlier.
Yeah.
So I knew that we had that, you know what I mean? Like we had a really, really, really good relationship out of the gate, really loving, passionate, and so I think if that foundation is strong out of the gates, then when you run into the problem, then it's like, but I have this reference point, right? That I have this North Star that's still like really good, right? I've been there before. Like there's something worth kind of coming back to. If the foundation isn't good to begin with, what's it worth coming back to? And then I think there's another thing I picked up from him, which was, if your marriage is in trouble, your relationship's in trouble, look at when we first get together with somebody, you think about it, we are so consumed with filling their needs. We're anticipating their needs when you think about it, right? It's like if you're chasing a girl, you're going, I wonder if she'd like this or she'd like this, what kind of movie she likes, what kind of food she likes, this and that. Yeah. And then after a while, we get into this complacent thing or even worse, we get into like, well, I don't really care what she wants. I want to go to see a basketball game. You know what I mean? Right, why don't we do my thing? We always do her thing, right? And we start getting into this like pettiness. And so I heard him say, and I'm kind of paraphrasing it, but if we treated each other in the last 90 days of our relationship the way we did in the first 90 days of the relationship would still probably carry on. And so I think in moments, and I haven't done this at times again because of alcohol abuse or whatever, but I think at moments where I felt the stuff really hit the fan of going, okay, like, can there be a reality check in this and go like, where do we want this fight to go? Like can I just try to see things from her side, from her needs, from her, and that's been probably the biggest thing. But I'd say foundationally, it's just like of course we have fights, we get mad, we break from the huddle and probably get quiet for a while. But then I think there's always just this strong foundation where you're like, well, I'm not going anywhere, and I don't think she's going anywhere. So maybe I should just try to understand what the heck's going on with her,
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. You're re-inspiring me because, I had a shoulder infection after my rotator cuff surgery. I got a post-operative infection and I had a bad reaction to that, and it went on for a long time before we even knew it was infected. And I had bad medicine reactions and stuff. And so Sharon basically just carried me for 9 months,
And that's after your dad passed. So you're probably already not great.
My dad passed all in the middle of all of that. And we found out my mom has dementia way worse than we thought. Yeah. And, and losing my dad was kind of a surprise. Like at 84, I should have been more ready for it maybe, right. But, it was still, we expected him to make it through this surgery and he just couldn't recover.
Sure.
And, so Sharon really just carried me. She was my rock, And, so I am committing right now with you right here in this moment to like, courting her. Yeah. And going back to that first 90 days kind of behavior, it's a brilliant suggestion anytime. And maybe especially now for me.
No, it's so funny too, because it actually feels good when you're doing something for someone else. But we just get in these things where we forget and whether it's, the complacency of like day to day or whether it becomes territorial. Yeah. But the stupid little things, like we got to eat at my restaurant instead of yours. And sometimes it's even like, do we even care? I mean, do we even actually care? Or do we just want to like win the argument or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
So sometimes it's just like, just going like, fine, let's just like do what you want to do. You know, it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Totally.
So,
yeah, that's awesome.
Cool, man.
Well, and you do executive recruiting for companies?
Yeah. So all leadership, we do, I'd say, mid-level leadership for larger corporations, and then high-level leadership for smaller ones. When I say smaller, still, you know, $5 to $200 million companies right in there that will place like CFOs, CEOs, stuff like that for private equity and companies like that. And then on the bigger scale, working with companies, you know, that are, you know, in the Fortune 500 and stuff like that, and helping them that's where we have more numbers, right? Like that's where we'll have like, you know, dozens of people going into individual companies.
Yeah. So I mean, I have a lot of big companies listening to this, and executives at big companies that, you know, they may want to make a move, or they may be looking for somebody to bring onto the team, so they can reach out to you.
Yeah, the biggest way to get in contact with me, and I hope people take this the right way. I'll explain in 30 seconds our business model, just so they do.
Yeah, please.
Candidates reaching out to me generally doesn't work very well, only because we're true headhunters, meaning like a corporation will put a rec out and say they'll hire us, right? Partner with us and say, we need you to find us a CFO in Miami, Florida with this criteria, right? And we'll go out and we will hunt and find that person. If someone comes to me individually and they're a group vice president out of Texas, the only time that's going to work is if I happen to be working on an exact match in Texas at the time. So usually when individuals reach out to me, I'll give them some pointers, but I kind of send them on their way unless I have a job that's going to match up. But people looking to hire, you know, generally at the director level and up, we're your guys. I've got a team of 20. We've got people spread out all over the place, and we've got a huge network. We've got about 90,000 people now in our database. So. Yeah,
wow. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's good.
All right, good. Well, good. Thanks for the clarification.
You got it,
because that's good, because how it works is how it works.
Yeah.
All right. Well, listen, I really, really appreciate you joining me.
Of course, I enjoyed it.
It was, and thanks for just jumping into the deep end right off. I think that's always, you know, better and more valuable anyway. So
it's always more fun in the deep end, I think. So thanks for taking us there. I appreciate it, John.
Great to have you, Ken. And thank you for listening. And I will see you next time on SpeakLikeALeader.show. Thanks for joining us, Ken.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining the Speak Like a Leader podcast. Go be awesome.